Hello, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Crafting a Compelling Service Opportunity Listing. I'm Jessica Birch, a VISTA Training Coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Also joining us today are Amy Kanata and Jenny Farrell from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A to help address questions you may have during the session. I'd like to welcome now our main speaker. Kate Baldus worked at Bank Street College of Education for 10 years where, in partnership with Education Northwest and AmeriCorps Vista, she designed and delivered trainings for Vista members, supervisors, and leaders. She also helped create and build the Vista campus. She has been an AmeriCorps supervisor and has over 15 years experience working in education and nonprofits. She is currently a freelance teacher, trainer, and writer, working at NYU and the Pratt Institute in New York. She has a passion for writing, the arts, and social change. I am also pleased to welcome our guest speaker for today, Heather Cunningham, National Training Director at Think Tank Incorporated. Heather's care for people has always been the center of her career. She has worked in the nonprofit sector for over a decade. She has developed and managed a statewide AmeriCorps Vista project that provides service volunteers to multiple nonprofits to increase their capacity. In addition to her work at Think Tank, Heather is the founder of a local nonprofit organization, Life Events Incorporated, which helps families in poverty celebrate life through providing support for special events. So, what are we here to talk about today? What are our goals for this session? So we did have a chat question at the beginning. We did have a little bit of a quiet chat there, so I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about how to create a compelling service opportunity listing. We did get a lot of questions or a lot of challenges that you guys wrote when you registered for this about how to attract more volunteers. Best practices was a big theme, how to write a service opportunity listing. And so this session here, we're going to have a few goals that we're going to go over and things that we hope that you'll learn by the end of this. So what we hope that you'll get out of this webinar is that you'll be able to articulate the importance of the service opportunity listing, especially at how it relates to your recruitment plan. We also like you to be able to describe what makes an engaging service opportunity listing and what those key components are. We also would like you to be able to draft a catchy 2-line teaser to attract those potential vistas to your organization. And last but definitely not least is describe that relationship between a VAD and a service opportunity listing. They do go hand in hand. They do work together very well. So we definitely want to make sure that you can see the benefits of relating those two as you develop both. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Kate so that she can start us off. So Kate, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. Hello all, it's great to be with you here today to discuss service opportunity listings. They are an important part of the recruitment process. And from what you kind of shared with us in the pre-registration survey, we really can already understand that you know about its importance. We will begin this session by looking at how the service opportunity listing fits in with the entire process of recruitment. The survey of VISTA supervisors done by Education Northwest, an organization that also works on the training of VISTAs and their supervisors, and who are here with us on the webinar today, found that word of mouth is the most successful recruitment tactic. This can mean either emailing or talking to staff, volunteers, colleagues, and people in your community. It is vitally important to have a concise opportunity listing that you can email or link to in an email when you spread the word. The report also found that successful VISTA recruiters recruit for specific candidate characteristics, particular skill sets, and personality traits. Supervisors also said it is important to make sure that candidates understand and have a strong interest in the VISTA service model. We will discuss how to refer to all of these things in your listings during the webinar. We want to emphasize this quote. VISTA supervisors stress the importance of creating a detailed and clear position description that can be used as a screening tool before and during an interview. The report I mentioned earlier found that having a position description that is detailed and clear is vital to marketing, recruiting, and screening candidates. The more clearly you are able to articulate what you want your vistas to do, the easier it will be to find the right candidates. Before we talk about what makes a service opportunity listing compelling, I want to define what we mean by service opportunity listing. All projects must complete a service opportunity listing, and this is done through eGrants. Supervisors, or sometimes the lead sponsoring agency, create the service opportunity listing in eGrants. Once the eGrants form is complete, you will click the Accepting Applications button, and your listing gets automatically posted to the myAmericorps.gov site, where it can be accessed by potential applicants. Detailed instructions for completing and publishing your service opportunity listing through eGrants can be found on the Vista campus. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Vista campus, it's an online learning portal for both Vistas, supervisors, and leaders, and you can find it at vistacampus.gov. Amy just shared the link to find the instructions for publishing your service opportunity listing on eGrants in the chat. And we will also include the link with the session recording. For each listing in eGrants, you create both a two-line teaser, which we will discuss in more depth later, and a position description, which includes a program description, member duties, and program benefits. You also have the opportunity to emphasize any skills you want the Vista to have. And although word of mouth was found to be the most effective recruitment tactic, we understand it does not work for everyone, and sometimes you have to post the position. Many supervisors post their positions on other websites, with Idealist and Craigslist being the most popular. Some also post to Facebook, put the listing on their own website, and also post in community boards and local listings. No matter where you post, there is key information that you want to include in your listing so that you get informed and passionate candidates. When writing the listings, there is a balance between making the position attractive while giving enough information so that people can make an informed choice as to whether Vista service is right for them. They also need to be the right fit for your organization and the position. We want to hear from you now. We have a chat question on the screen. What do you think makes a service opportunity listing stand out, either on myAmericorps or another site? Please enter your ideas into the chat panel and make sure you send them to all participants, as we want your comments to be visible to everyone. Please do not enter your comment into the Q&A panel further down the screen, but just use the chat panel. So again, what makes a service opportunity listing stand out, either on myAmericorps or another site like Idealist?
Thank you, Kate. So as these come in, we'll read out some of these. They're starting to trickle in now. So Desiree said an engaging active verbiage, which is great. Those action verbs are always a great way to pull people in. A short, compelling opportunity statement, that's always a great one. Get them hooked. Specific responsibilities has been listed. Opportunity to change a life, so really hitting at people's desire to, I guess, do good, to help out their community, maybe hit at something that they're passionate in. That's something that can make it stand out. A clear title for a position, so knowing what someone's going to be able to do, what they are going to be responsible for is always a helpful thing. Let's see. Going along with that, a detailed job description, so not only having that title of that position, but also what they're exactly going to have to do as a Vista. Passion and compassion, an inspiring project description. So selling your project, you know, why should someone come and be a Vista for your organization? What work do you do that would make them passionate about that? Those are some great ones. The person's particular interest. These are all great. It sounds like they're really hitting a lot of the key things that we're going to talk about here. So, Kate, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. And thanks to all of you who contributed into the chat. You know, I see the themes of passion, clarity, detail, all really important. Also kind of talking about who will be served and how somebody will make a difference. And we're going to talk about all of those things today. What we have on the slide here is a list of the key information to include in your listings, which I think echoes back to what you had in the chat. So you want to say, who, meaning what is your organization's mission, history, and role in the community? Where? What are the unique features of your location? What will members do? And this is where we would refer to that active verbiage that someone brought up in the chat. You want to use active words that convey challenge and excitement and that describe the capacity building activities your member will do. And you can use the that activities to develop a brief list of tasks that you can use in your opportunity listing. Why should people join your organization? What are the benefits? What will they learn? What will they accomplish? What do you offer that's unique? And this is where you can sort of tap into that passion side of the listing. And then also there's the nitty-gritty. Start and end dates, contact information, living allowance amount, TCBs. And if you have a listing from more than a year ago, please remember that the outside employment restriction has been lifted. Vistas are now allowed to have a part-time job while serving, as long as they get approval from you, their supervisor. So if you have the working condition in an old listing, please update it before you post for this summer. You also have an opportunity to draw in people with the program benefits field of the opportunity listing. Some things that you could add here include the living allowance rate for your county, choice of education award with amount, or end of service stipend with amount. You can also mention leave time allowance and anything extra you plan to provide, like additional training, housing, meal plans, or transport. This is the place to share any unique things your program can offer. Now I would like to welcome Heather Cunningham from Think Tank, Inc., who will talk about how to tap into personal motivations and benefits that you may want to include in your opportunity listings. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks, Kate. I am so happy to be with you all today. So, as Kate said, I'm with Think Tank, and we are a nonprofit organization that exists to alleviate poverty, and we help individuals and communities shift their thinking and the way that they look at poverty and encourage folks to look at poverty from a holistic lens. We are an intermediary sponsor who stations VISTA members across Ohio, and the VISTAs in our project develop anti-poverty programs, lead volunteer recruitment, resource development, and research. We have learned a lot during our time as a VISTA sponsor the last 7 years, and VISTA service has become really an important part of our work. So you've heard from Kate about recruitment. She discussed the value of word of mouth as an effective way to share the VISTA service opportunity. And so as we begin to unpack the service opportunity a little bit further, I would like for you to think about a time that you personally have volunteered. I did see that Lucretia mentioned in the chat box that accessing your own personal experience as a volunteer is a good thing to consider when you're writing your service opportunity listing. And so you will see that there's a poll on your screen, and I would like for you to just take a moment and select the answer that you think best completes the sentence, I volunteer because. And so you'll see the following factors can contribute to why folks volunteer. And so I'm just going to talk real quickly about each of those factors if you want to go ahead and select which option you think best completes the sentence, I volunteer because. So when we think about the reasons that we volunteer, our personal values can be a factor. You know, people want to satisfy personal values and put their care for humanity into action. Community concern, sometimes folks want to work with a particular community group or neighborhood or around a specific social issue. When we think about, why we volunteer, self-esteem, the truth is volunteering can make us feel better about ourselves. Gaining understanding, service can help you better understand people, cultures, and places. And then the last, personal professional development. Volunteering is a way to challenge yourself, meet new people, and can help with professional development. So let's take a look and see how the group responded. Jessica?
Thanks, Heather. So it looks like the poll is closing, so everyone should have put in their responses now. So as we just wait for those poll results to come in, we'll take a look here. All right, so actually, it's pretty spread out across the board. The most we had here is a lot of people volunteer because of personal values, the community concern, and also another high percentage for personal development. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Heather.
Great, wow. So that's great. I can relate to your responses. And as it turns out, there was a study conducted by the American Psychological Association which found that these areas are the top 5 reasons why people volunteer. And so I believe that it can be really helpful to think about your own personal experience and consider your driving force behind volunteer activity as you recruit VISTA volunteers. So now let's talk about factors to consider when crafting your service opportunity listing. So you'll see the picture on the slide on your screen. The picture on the right is actually of our Mayor's Day event last year in Dayton, Ohio. And so I'm sure many of you are getting ready for your Mayor's Day activities since they're just around the corner in April. But let's talk about these core principles that we have utilized in recruitment. And so in my experience, we found it very helpful to consider the following core principles when starting the recruitment process. One thing, it's important to be mindful that recruitment is a process and not just an event. So often we put a great deal of time into developing materials and attending recruitment fairs and other activities instead of remembering that recruitment's a process and should be ongoing. And so the service opportunity listing is the first phase in that process. So let's talk about the first principle, build social capital. Well, isolation doesn't work for anyone. VISTA is a way for folks to obtain an immense amount of social capital. VISTA members become part of a tribe, if you will, that's about honor and service. Every year, I ask our VISTAs what has impacted them during service, and hands down, every single one mentions social capital. So doing with instead of to or for, the second principle. Well, I know there are times that I want to do for the VISTA candidates and hold their hand through the entire application process. And I think that this can really work against solid retention. Characteristics of successful VISTA members are things like the ability to self-direct and problem solve, and ensuring that you're communicating the opportunity well and there's a connection to the VAD really does increase the VISTA member's staying power. So number 3, listen first to discover strengths. Well, I know if you have had any experience like I've had, we get really excited about the extra support through VISTA, and as a nonprofit, we quickly begin writing our needs lists. And we forget to also make a list of the organization's assets. Listening to those who are part of the organization already and what makes them want to serve for our cause. What makes the organization attractive, instead of focusing on the deficits, consider the strengths. Why is serving at your organization a great opportunity? The next one, promote leadership. VISTA service isn't some superficial resume builder. It's about authentic development, leadership development. It's about growth and change and being part of a community. It's critical you figure out how to communicate this benefit in your opportunity listing. There are many job openings that do not offer the chance to cultivate true servant leadership, and VISTA does. So the last principle, a holistic approach, recognizing that it's all interconnected. Your service opportunity cannot just be about the intellectual or financial part, because the relational and meaning and purpose that one can gain from VISTA service is equally as important. So I found that these core principles to be very helpful and great ways to measure how to best share service opportunities with others. I would like to finish by just sharing a brief story. So the picture that you see on the left is a group of our AmeriCorps VISTA members from several years ago. And the one on the right is a picture of David, a member who served with our project for 3 years. When I think about service opportunity listings and the recruitment experiences that I've had, I think about David. He's a retired gentleman who has decided to give back to his community through service. I remember sharing the opportunity with him, doing the interview, and when he accepted the offer. I was very excited to have someone with his education and background in the business sector as part of our team. So a week or so before PSO, I met with David to cover the last few details. And he was really surprised when I mentioned the living allowance. He went through almost the entire recruitment first phase and thought that he would be working full-time with our project for completely free. And I remember I was shocked. He was signing up because he wanted to give back. He wanted to learn and he wanted to build relationships. At times, I think we can get lost in the details that are required when placing VISTA members, and I think that there are plenty of folks out there just like David. I think it's important to take a moment and consider why we use the language service opportunity, not job offer, not position opening, but a chance to serve your community and impact poverty. It's an opportunity that David knew that he couldn't pass up, and the living allowance was just a bonus. All right, now that you've thought about the key components and benefits that you can include in your opportunity listing, Kate is going to help us think about how we can make our listing more engaging. Kate?
Great, thanks, Heather. So the idea is Heather shared that we can think about what inspires us to volunteer when recruiting and to articulate core principles behind the work that we do are both really powerful points. And what a great story about David. I don't think he is the only VISTA candidate who did not understand the benefits offered. Thank you, Heather, for sharing that story and how inspiring to think that David was willing to serve, for free. In order to deepen our understanding of the listing, we're first going to look at some two-line teasers and discuss what works with them and what can make them stronger. When VISTAs view the CNCS recruitment site, the teaser is what they see first. They have to be enticed enough by the teaser to click on it to get more information about the position and your program. The two-line teaser is limited to 200 characters, so you want to put something in your teaser that will both hook your audience and make them click to learn more about your project, while also giving a couple of details. Also, the two-line teaser can be adapted to use as an elevator speech when recruiting through word of mouth. What you see on the screen is what a candidate will see when they go to the AmeriCorps website. So let's look at a teaser in more depth. There's one on the screen. Our after-school program supports kids in grades 4 through 8 by matching them with mentors and providing tutoring services. What do you think? Please put your ideas in the chat. What works in this listing, and what could make it stronger?
All right, thank you, Kate. So what do you think of this teaser? So it's Communications and Fundraising Vistas at Reading Partners. Their teaser says, our after-school program supports kids in grades 4 through 8 by matching them with mentors and providing tutoring services. So what do you think of this teaser? All right, so these chats are coming in, these chat results. Okay, so what could make this stronger? What works in this listing? So someone here said, like, what is the outcome? So ask that question. It's very good. It doesn't really say what the main goal is. Erin here said that it may make the member think that they'll be tutoring. Correct. There's no clear distinction as to what exactly the position is. Bridget here laid it out plain and clear. It's boring. It doesn't really draw you in. And also the impact. Where is the impact? What do we see as the impact? Let's take a look here. What are the results? It suggests direct service, so that's correct. There's no real distinction about what the person will be doing. And someone here said to what end and what will result from the work. So Kate, looks like they have a pretty good pulse on this. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we agree with everything that you're saying in the chat, that there's really no information about the position itself here. The candidate has no idea what she or he will be doing. And really good point, those of you who said that they might even think that this is direct service, that they will be doing the tutoring themselves. It does, however, give a little bit of information about the program. And as you also mentioned, there is really nothing catchy about this teaser. So let's take a look at another one. The VISTA will work on raising funds from multiple channels, including individual donors, grants, and events. And we'll also get the word out via email blasts, newsletters, and social media. What do you think? Please put your ideas in the chat. What works in this listing? What could make it stronger?
Thank you, Kate. So we'll give some people some time here to enter. So we have a new one here. Obviously, you can see the length of it is a little bit longer, but what do you think about it? What works? What could be better? Someone says here that it lists specific tasks. It also says, well, I think Stephanie here is making the suggestion that maybe it should say you instead of the VISTA. Make it more personalized so it's like you can see yourself in that position. It says it tells what the VISTA will do, but it's not catching. It's kind of stagnant. Let's see here. Love it. Elizabeth says, gives description of work, but doesn't give information about cause. It's kind of boring. Seeing a kind of theme here with these. It does give a clear description of the role, so it does tell them what they'll be doing, kind of gives them an idea of someone applying that they can kind of get an idea. And let's take a look here. Let's see, it uses words, or it says that we should use words like engaging donors or promotion through social media. So there's a lot of different suggestions here. Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you think about this?
Okay, yeah, and we agree with what you're saying in the chat, that there are some nice details here about the activities and specific tasks, but really nothing catchy, no information about the organization, you know, really no information about sort of what they're working on and the impact of the work. That there's really still not quite enough in this teaser either, although it does give some nice details about the activities that VISTA will be doing. All right, so let's take a look at a made-over teaser and identify what's different and what makes this one stronger than the earlier ones. So we have here on the screen, help children succeed. As our VISTA, you will raise funds from multiple channels and will tell our story in our public materials. Great opportunity for a writer or budding fundraiser to serve in an after-school and mentoring program. So this teaser has a hook, help children succeed, which is a nice way to show that this position works with kids without telling them. And the hook is also active and positive, which was mentioned earlier by someone in the chat about using active verbiage. A candidate can look at this and think, I can help make a difference in a child's life. That will appeal to some people. Some of you shared in the pre-registration survey that you have challenges balancing how to give enough information in a listing while also being attention-grabbing. I don't think you need to do a lot to grab attention. A simple hook like we have here, help children succeed, really is enough. This teaser also includes information about what the VISTA will do, raise funds and communication, and the teaser defines the type of person who might be the right fit, a writer or budding fundraiser. This gives the listing a bit of the what's in it for me quality so that the candidate can think, I want to be a writer or I want to be a fundraiser. This might be right for me. And as someone mentioned in the chat earlier, this teaser speaks to the VISTA as, you know, as our VISTA, you, instead of speaking as a generic VISTA. And finally, the program information is woven in at the end. You can see that this is woven in at the end. You can also see that this teaser comes in right under the 200-character word count. It's 195 characters. The earlier, less catchy teasers were actually shorter than they needed to be. So we're now going to look at the member duties section of one listing. Take a look at what is on the screen. For this listing, it says, members will create new programs for our shelter. Members will also plan events. Communication skills needed. So what do you think of this one? This is the members duty section of the listing, what the VISTAs will, the candidates click on the teaser and then they sort of pop down to this section of My AmeriCorps. Vote by selecting the check or X button on the participant panel to the right. If you use the check, that means you think this listing is good to go, or X means you think it needs improvement. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of red X's popping up, Jessica.
I am too, and I'm also seeing a lot of things in the chat coming through that it's a little bit choppy. It's kind of abrupt, another boring. It reads like a help wanted ad. Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah, a lot of those to go with those red X's instead of back to you, Kate.
Great, yeah, and we agree with you that there's just not enough detail here in the members' duty section, and that this really needs some improvement. Unless the person knows something about your program or really wants to serve with you, there's no incentive for them to apply. We want you to think about your listing as a marketing tool that can help sell the experience to the candidates, and this one really doesn't do so. There's no need to skimp on what you put in the member duties of the listing. A few of you in the webinar registration survey asked about the relationship between the VAD and the service opportunity listing. The members duty section is where your VAD comes in. Since the VAD includes refined language describing a member's activity, it becomes an excellent resource for writing position announcements that appeal to applicants best suited for the VISTA roles you have defined. You can use the activities described in the VAD to populate the member duties section of a position announcement. And another question that came in the registration survey too was, do I need, unique position announcements for each of my different positions? And I would say if you have if a member has a unique VAD, you want a unique position announcement for that position as well. But there really is a direct correlation here between the two. So let's look at a listing from a subsite of the Mercy Corps project in Oregon, where we have found that they have strong service opportunity listings. I won't read the whole thing, but let's look at the first sentence, which describes what the candidate will do and also connects to their passion. It says, as a VISTA member at New Connections, you will help end poverty by creating a program that links low-income ex-offenders with employment. Then they go on to talk more about the major functions of the position. There is actually a lot more to the member duty section than what we put on the screen. You have up to 650 characters, and we encourage you to include as much relevant detail from the VAD as you can in this section so your candidates can make an informed choice about your position. But we wanted to call your attention to that opening line, which is quite effective. And now let's look at the skills section for the same position. Applicants should hold a 4-year degree in behavioral sciences or similar, or 4 years of relevant work experience or a combination thereof. The applicant should be independent, possess strong writing skills, and enjoy public speaking. The applicant should have experience with MS Office Suite, project planning, and volunteer recruitment. Here they communicated specific skills to try and target candidates with the backgrounds that they need for the position. They also write about both skills, public speaking and writing, and personal characteristics, like being independent. By adding more detail to the skills area, the candidate gets more information about the position as it reinforces the tasks they will be doing, in this case, writing and public speaking. Before we move on, we'd like to share a few strategies for intermediary sponsoring organizations who oversee supervisors at subsites. 45% of you indicated during registration that you are an intermediary sponsor who has subsite projects. Intermediary sponsors and subsites divvy up recruitment tasks in many ways. Here are some samples of how projects work together to recruit. First, you could have the intermediary sponsors recruit directly. This works well when placement sites and member assignments are similar. The intermediary crafts the service opportunity listing and conducts outreach. You could also have sponsors ask subsites to recruit. This works well when individual projects and VADs vary across placement sites. Subsites take on almost all of the recruitment tasks, including writing their own service opportunity listing. And finally, some sites use a hybrid model. The intermediary organization conducts marketing. This includes writing the service opportunity listing, then screens and interviews candidates to create an applicant pool for second interviews with subsites. No matter which model you use, it's a good idea to collaborate with your subsites to ensure you create a service opportunity listing that is accurate. Another tip we heard from sponsors is that templates can help subsites create stronger listings and also allow you to have some input in the message they are creating. Templates also save time, which I know is something that also came up in the registration survey. People want to kind of how to write service opportunity listings efficiently. So here is an example of the first few sentences for a template to support subsites. The underlying areas are all adapted for each site and position. Now here's an example of how the template might look once filled out by your subsite. As a VISTA member at ABC Cares, you will help end poverty by building a volunteer recruitment and support system. Major functions will include creating a tracking system for volunteer inquiries, writing marketing materials, and developing a volunteer training program. So we're going to wrap up with a few things. There's some tips for success. External opportunity postings should include the same detail as your MyAmericorps listing so that applicants are well aware of the project goals, benefits, and stipends, no matter where they hear about your position. Create a record where your best applicants found out about your listing. If you know where the best prospects are coming from, you will know where to post positions in the future. Once a position is filled and the applicant has confirmed they will serve at your site, make sure to take down external listings and uncheck accepting applications and e-grants so people don't waste time applying to a closed position. And finally, we encourage you to look for candidates within the community you serve, whether they are current volunteers or service recipients. Effective and passionate recruitment messages touch on the characteristics of the program, focus on the needs and interests of the applicants, and create an emotional pull. Member satisfaction and retention starts with recruitment. If you can define who you need and what you need done clearly from the beginning, you are more likely to have a successful project. To end, we have a few action steps we'd like you to consider. Take a look at your two-line teaser. What could you do to make it more complete or catchier? Are you using your badge for your member duties part of the listing? If not, we suggest you go back and see if you can add more concrete and active language from your badge to that area. And finally, what makes your program unique? Consider adding one or two things about your program's core values or unique programming. Or maybe you want to emphasize the skills that VISTA will develop or the professional training you can provide. As we said earlier, effective service opportunity listings are both marketing and recruitment tools and strike a balance between making the position attractive while also giving the candidates enough information to make an informed decision about the position. We are now going to move on to a Q&A, and I want to thank you for your participation today and your great response to the chat and polls. We learn so much from all of you every time we do a webinar. Jessica?
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Heather, for all of your work on this webinar, and most importantly, thank you all for your VISTA supervisors on the phone. Thank you for all you do to support your VISTAs and the VISTA program. Before you leave and before we go on to Q&A, we would like to have you take the evaluation. We want to know what you thought. So on the right side of your screen, you will find a quick poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. Please take a moment to answer the questions. We do like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input helps us. We look at this frequently to see of new topics, new themes of things that you guys really need. So please just take a few minutes to do that. And as you're doing that, we're going to move on to the Q&A. We've given you a lot to think about. Heather and Kate have given you a lot of information, and so we want to make sure you have an opportunity to get your questions answered that you may have. So you can ask a question using the Q&A chat panel, or I'm sorry, the Q&A panel located in the right of your screen. I'm going to also ask our operator now to let us know how to ask a question by the phone. Operator, are you there?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes. If you would like to ask a question at this time, that will be *1 on your phone. *1 to ask a question through the audio. To withdraw your question, that will be then 2. You'll be asked to state your name prior to joining the queue. Please make sure your mute feature is off and you state your name clearly. Once again, to ask a question, *1.
Thank you. So as we wait for questions to come in over the phone, we did have a few that did come into the chat panel, so I want to make sure we go over those. We had a question here. Bob asked, how can we recruit potential VISTA members that have applied through the VISTA portal? How do we get access to the list of people who are interested in becoming a VISTA? Can we send them an email asking them if they are interested in our position? That's a great question. And what we're going to do, Amy posted this link earlier, but I'm going to also post it again. There is, on the VISTA campus site, there is a resource called Search for Applicants in MyAmericorps on the VISTA campus, and this allows you to leverage this Search for Applicants function in the MyAmericorps system to track potential candidates and see if that they're interested in your program. So definitely take a look at that. The whole section that we have on eGrants is fairly new. It's developed, it's recent, and we did a webinar on eGrants not too long ago, so definitely check that out, especially since you have to do these service opportunity listings in eGrants. There are some great resources there as well. Operator, do we have any questions that have come in over the phone?
I'm showing no phone questions at this time. Once again, to ask a question on the phone lines, that is star, then 1.
Great. Thank you so much. So, here's a question about service opportunity listings that came in through the registration. So let's just see. I'm going to ask Kate and Heather maybe to think of one resource here. So someone here in the registration asked, what is the best practice for clear and engaging opportunity listings? Maybe listen one time, like one thing, one best practice that you have learned as a VISTA supervisor. When doing these opportunity listings, what is one thing that really you like to utilize each and every time you draft one? So I'm going to ask Kate, and I'm also going to ask Heather to see if you have any of those best kind of practices.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. This is Kate. I think that, you know, connecting back to what Heather was saying earlier about really speaking to the passion of the VISTAs, you know, I think having that catch in there so that you can really find candidates who want to serve and who are aligned with the mission of VISTA and the mission of your organization, you know, is a really important component to have in the listing, and that I think sometimes gets left out.
And Heather, do you have any additional? I know Kate just mentioned yours and she referenced what you said, but any other best practices from your end?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I would have to say, from our experience, I think sometimes we think about the verbiage and the actual language with the service opportunity listing, which is very important. But then we forget about things like what information our website has, or external resources that are out there. So as folks begin the application process, they may do some research on their own about the cause or the organization. And so I think it's important to consider those factors. You know, what information is going to be readily accessible for folks, whether it be, you know, a website or the person that's listed as the contact. Making sure that folks are able to learn more about the work the organization is doing outside of just the service opportunity listing.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. And that also making sure with those service opportunity listings that they match the information that you have. With recruitment, you're probably using a lot of different sites. Maybe you've posted the position on not only AmeriCorps or MyAmericorps, you've also posted it on Idealist, and maybe even LinkedIn. And then you also have your website. So you want to make sure that all of the information there is the same. So you don't want the mission statement of your organization or the goal of the project to be one thing in one listing and then not the other. So definitely making sure, Kate mentioned earlier that if you have like an old listing up that talks about maybe the old rule on not being able to have outside employment, make sure that those are up to date. Make sure that these things match, because these things matter. These matter to VISTAs. They matter especially with the general demographic of who the majority of VISTAs are. They're generally right out of college. They're more than likely very tech savvy, so they do notice things like that. So just make sure, just a quick little tip with that. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that, but just as a reminder, make sure everything matches, because we don't want to see that be a barrier to recruiting a really great candidate. So let's see on the phone. Operator, are any questions over the phone?
I'm sure no questions at this time.
Great. And there's not many others in the Q&A. I'm going to reach out to our colleagues at Education Northwest. Are there any questions that we missed?
Hi, Jessica. This is Amy. I noticed that Mark asked a question about getting AmeriCorps swag or posters to help with recruitment efforts.
Yes, thank you, Amy. So, so there is a site. I'm going to post it here. There is a site. It's our National Service website that that has gear that is available to the public, such as VISTA Serving Here posters and additional, I guess, resources for recruitment. So I'm going to go ahead and post that into the chat right now, and you can use those sorts of things to help with recruitment. So I just posted that in the chat right now. It's pubs.nationalservice.gov, and you can go in there, create an account, and there do have, I know off the top of my head, I think some brochures and some posters to help your recruitment efforts. And it's also another great way that maybe once you get a VISTA the first day, have their workspace set up with that VISTA poster. It's a great way to welcome them as well. All right, one last time I'm going to go to the operator. Operator, are there any questions over the phone?
I'm showing no questions at this time.
All right, so so I think that we've touched on all the questions here, but never fear, if there is a question that pops up the moment you log off of this webinar, you can email us at vistawebinars@cns.gov. We will be more than happy to answer any of those questions that you may have. And we do hope that you join us for our next webinar. It's about project sustainability approaches and strategies. It is on April 19th. And the great thing about this webinar is that it is in a partnership with our VISTA member webinars. So VISTA members will also have a webinar about sustainability. So they really go hand in hand, and it really sets up a great conversation for you to have with your VISTA members on sustainability of the project. So thank you again all for your time. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and we will see you next time.